Spoiler alert for the Nod-Krai Archon quests, Act 5 and 6. Hey, it's me, Roosevelt. Boy, do I have some thoughts about the Luna 3 patch. I also realized I didn't make a video for the last patch that was very Conria heavy, but listen, it's been rough for me. I'm completely heartbroken, devastated, ruined. A man I've loved so dearly for years turned out to be pretty terrible. And yes, I mean King Irmin. And perhaps there were some red flags with the whole cataclysm thing, but I can fix him. Anyway, but meow, I'm back because we got Catgirl Arlecchino, and honestly, I think we all needed that. Also, we have Durin! Ah! And speaking of Durin, before I get into Luna 3 lore, I want to introduce Lootbar.gg. In Lootbar, you can recharge transactions for Genshin Impact at a lower cost through their platform, to your own account or as a gift to others. It's cheap, it's secure, and it's fast. You only need the account ID. You can get Durin at a specially low price in Lootbar with their special package for the Luna 3 version. For the first time purchase, you could even get a double bonus in-game and get a 10% discount. And for returning users, is up to 5%. Lootbar has been promoted by other creators like Raiden Shotgun, Mordex, and Teyvat Times. So with that, who is joining me in becoming C6 Durin mains? Anyway, with that, let's briefly summarize the story so far. In the last patch, we learned a lot about Conria. The Rayreer problem is solved after he gets yeeted into a moon gate and is warped to, I don't know. Now the Moon Prayer Festival is coming up, and that's when the real moon is closest to Teyvat. Columbina wants to go back to the moon as she's getting weaker and weaker because the world of Teyvat is rejecting her. She loses her strength to the point her physical existence disappears, and she just follows Traveler around as a little ghosty. We finally meet Alice in person, and Alice totally breaks the fourth wall in her introduction by adjusting the camera and the on-screen text. Side note, I have totally joked before that the Harbingers know they're doing dramatic title card entrances for Traveler, because right after we first met Dottore back in Sumeru, Paimon is immediately like, "Wow, I can't believe the Doctor is ranked number 2! But we only knew that because of the card. Anyway, I digress. Alice explains that the moons once controlled the laws of Teyvat, like life and death. But when the Heavenly Principles showed up, the Shades replaced those roles. So the moons were no longer necessary or needed by the world. She's very specific in her language that there was no logic to them being around anymore. Anyway, back to Columbina. Alice sends us on a quest to find out Columbina's true name, as this can act as a tether to Teyvat. Of course, we discover that she never had a true name to begin with, and we, as her friends, needed to give her one. The power of friendship wins once again! Meanwhile, throughout the story, we're wondering about what the Doctor is up to, because he's been strangely absent. I miss him. We learned in Natlan that he took interest in the moons. Wanderer shows up, also pointing out that he seems to be up to something, and also Wanderer wants revenge. Daddy roasts Dottore for being a college dropout, which I thought was super funny. And also, I totally forgot that I named my Wanderer Steve McDickle. Anyway, of course, just as Columbina is about to go back to the moon, she gets transported into Dottore's hands instead, of course. He steals the iridescent and eternal moon marrows, cages Columbina, and he and Traveler duke it out. And Columbina escapes into a moon gate so that Dottore won't get the frost moon power as well. Afterwards, we realize Dottore has been pulling a lot of strings this entire time. Also, speaking of time, he was able to freeze it during the fight. I'm sure that's not of any consequence here. So now we have to figure out where Columbina is and what Dottore is planning. Also, we met Nicole in person during this quest, who seems incredibly not as mysterious as she seemed in Fontaine or Sumeru. She's an angel and one of the few who was able to keep her form, although she can only communicate via clown-to-clown communication. But she seems pretty keen to talk for hours about the history of the world, and I'm like, Nicole, please do, God, I'm begging you. Anyway, so I just want to recap some of the lore dumpies both Alice and Nicole gave us. First of all, there might be a bit of an audio shift here. Last night I was recording from my mossy cavern where I keep all my treasures, and now I am not. Also, I am way less tired. 12 a.m. Deluluvelt really thought she could finish this before she went to bed. So about them moons. So originally, there was just the Light Realm and Nibelung, who would be the Dragon King and build a sexy high-tech dragon society, where they would aspire to reach the stars and cosmos above. Nibelung created the 3 moons to govern the world: the Frost Moon, the Eternal Moon, and the Iridescent Moon. He would yeet himself into space, but in his absence, the heavenly principles would show up and steal those primordial powers. The control over the rules of the world would be given to the Shades. But the moon's purpose was to keep the world operational, so the heavenly principles never saw them as a threat. And also, the moon goddesses would protect the people, which is why the Hyperboreans and later the Frostmoon Scions would revere them. Uh-oh, small problem though. The dragons saw their peace treaty with the heavenly principles as an act of betrayal. And then Nibelung came back with abyssal power and forbidden knowledge, starting the War of Funerary Flame, or the Great War of Vengeance. The moons debated over realigning with their creator or maintaining peace by staying neutral. This made Nibelung big mad, and he imprisoned them for their disloyalty and turned them into weapons. This then made the heavenly principles big mad, who would end up shattering 2 moons and flinging the other's corpse, that of the Frost Moon, beyond the false sky. The remains of the Eternal Moon are what we saw in Natlan, and the Iridescent Moon's corpse would sink to the abyss. It would become tainted with abyssal power and would turn into the Crimson Moon, the same Crimson Moon that the first dynasty of Khaenri'ah worshipped. So the world is in shambles at this point. Relatable, am I right, fellas? The heavenly principles use celestial nails to cleanse the abyssal corruption, and would, I guess, win the war, but, at what cost? Anyway, this would be followed by the era of the God Kings and eventually the Archon War, after the third Descender was chopped up into Gnosis. So this is all to say that despite the heavenly principles stripping them of their original governing roles, even their remains are super powerful. Like, even though the Iridescent Moon was tainted by abyssal corruption, it was still the source of power for the Bale Moon Bloodfire lineage, and their powers involve erasing memories. And with the 2 Moon Marrows and Columbina, Dottore was able to freeze time. I'm so tempted to make this about Kaeya, but we're not quite there yet. Just hold your horses, if you have any. But here's what I want to throw out there. René of Narcissenkreuz said in his notes that certain higher order powers exist, like the Abyss and Kavarna, and they can rewrite the rules. And given that Dottore was able to freeze time, I think it's also safe to say that the moon's power is also of a higher order, one with a timey-wimey sort of flavor to it. Now, this may seem like an obvious or not new point, but it's just a segue because in the quest we did get to see abyssal powers rewriting the rules. And also, speaking of Dottore, I haven't talked about the phantoms at all yet, and that's a pretty critical aspect of these quests, so let me dive right in. So a dragon, a puppet, and a homunculus walk into a bar. The bartender is actually a ghost from Hyperborea, and he says to the guys, "Would you fellas like some booze?" Yeah, so there are a ton of phantoms appearing in Nod-Krai. Because of the closeness of the real moon to Teyvat, there's been a lot of Kuvaki energy, and this causes phantoms of the past to appear. We're literally witnessing moments of the past. So my joke doesn't actually make any sense because that guy isn't really a ghost. Feel free to boo me. Anyway, there are a ton of phantoms this year, and Alice says it's because of the trilunar syzygy. Basically, the power of the 3 moons are all coalesced, again reinforcing the idea that the moons have time powers. Durin and Albedo go off to investigate the phantoms at Alice's direction. Here's the thing. You can kinda interact with the phantoms, but you can't change anything. Varka says, it's almost like we're in some kind of interactive stage play. We can talk to the actors, but the plot is fixed and we can't influence it. However, the Withering in Sumeru proved that the Abyss could alter Irminsul and make things that shouldn't exist appear. It's tantamount to rewriting reality to an extent. So, perhaps Durin can use his Abyss power to break the rules here. This is what René of Narcissenkreuz was talking about. Wanderer is skeptical for obvious reasons, but after all, Alice did tell them to figure out a way to change the Phantom's outcomes. Durin tries to save a Hyperborean named Razmataz. I'll call him Raz. Raz can't see the 3 though. Durin is able to influence Raz's decisions with his abyssal power, via bad vibes, basically. But he is unable to ultimately save him. I accidentally let him die like 50 times. I'm so sorry, Raz, my dude. You didn't deserve that. I did you dirty. However, after a while, Raz is able to perceive and talk to the three. He explained that he felt like he could always see them, but only really realized just then. But also, he becomes aware that these scenes have been playing out over and over. Like, a lot for me, definitely. How very Samsara of you, Genshin Impact. So the four spend some time just talking before Raz goes to meet his fate. The conversation isn't of much consequence. They just share some background and stories, which does beg the question, what if they shared knowledge that was consequential? Because that's exactly what Dottore did. Basically, after the War of Funerary Flame, the Hyperboreans created a portal to try and get in touch with the moons, but found that they were dead. Nicole said Columbina could use that same portal to go back to the moon. But here's the thing, Dottore interacted with the Phantoms and convinced them a savior would create a new moon in the false sky. They believed him and told him everything about the moons, and he used this knowledge to exploit the portal spell such that Columbina would be transported to a false moon, which only resembles a moon more than the frost moon does. Which is why the Fatui were collecting moon fragments, and there's this huge moon thing at the Kuvaki research facility. So Columbina, instead of going to the moon, was transported to this false moon where Dottore was. Scoob and the gang discussed this later, saying he stacked a lot of little variables to orchestrate this entire thing. So, to stop Dottore from using the power of the three moons, Columbina escaped into a moon gate, and we don't know where she is now. Where is Columbina? Or when is Columbina? Disclaimer, I'm now in the speculation section of the video, so... Okay, earlier in the quest, we talked to the Iridescent moon, and her tone is strange. It's like she's talking to an old friend. Columbina says perhaps she mistook her for the old frost moon, but she addresses Columbina as Hypo, and this implies that they've met before, because Columbina's new name is Columbina Hyposelenia. But the thing is, she didn't choose that name until later in the quest. So she definitely somehow interacted with the past, I think. Maybe not classic time travel, but time-space shenanigans. I mean, consider the Phantoms. We're literally witnessing scenes of the past play out, and Durin and the gang talked with Raz. And of course, Dottore spread his misinformation to the Hyperboreans. And this is all very similar to the Traveler quest in Natlan, where ley lines were being rewoven to revive Conria, and two spacetimes overlapped. Now, that was also quite different due to the circumstances, and also in that Traveler physically interacted with Diridith, and instead of knowledge, a physical key was exchanged. Nicole said it well when she described it as not traveling back, but creating a handshake between 2 points in space-time. So I haven't had time to really look into the discourse around this, but I know it's been talked about, and I personally have no idea what they plan to do with Columbina. Maybe the location in the Moongate is like a tesseract from Interstellar, where the past can be viewed and interacted with via gravity. Don't you get it, Tars? Cooper, they didn't send us here to change the past. Anyway, I started speculating and I spiraled, so I'm just gonna ramble about the nature of time for a bit. Like I said, it seems like Columbina is going to interact with the past somehow. Time shenanigans. But no matter what plot or means they go with, whatever Columbina is going to do next in the story, it has already been done. The TV trope is called, "You have already changed the past." Any future time-space shenanigans are already baked into a self-consistent timeline. The story as we experience it is already meddled with by the future. I will spare you guys some suffering and not ramble on about the block universe and eternalism, but I do have some other videos that talk a lot about that. But yeah, the concept that the past, present, and future are all equally real and it's just a matter of perspective and they're all basically unchangeable. Some exceptions may apply, but I'm not going to get into that because I will spiral. Anyway, but here's a potential example of this "you have already changed the past" TV trope might play out. Luonnotar. Luonnotar is a special Kuhenki that looks like a rabbit Columbina, but Columbina says she had nothing to do with this particular one that follows us around everywhere. Luonnotar can take thousands of years to form, and Traveler thinks, a blessing from long, long ago. I feel like there's just enough of a special emphasis on Luonnotar that makes me think she was in fact created by Columbina, but maybe just not by the version we met. So she's not lying or forgetting. What I'm saying is, maybe Luonnotar was created by a future Columbina who manifested her in the past. Again, this is just me crackpot speculating, but consider this. She's leading you to Columbina all the time, and also she greets you with a little smoochie on the forehead when you first meet. That feels just slightly intimate. So, my point is, perhaps this special Luonnotar has knowledge or even memories of the future, and that's why it's so determined to guide you around. I do low-key have some crack thoughts about Columbina even dying in the past, but preserving her memories via Luonnotar to be reborn again since she got the death card. But I haven't cooked that nearly enough, so ignore me. Anyway, at this point, I want to pivot a little bit to a related topic. So this quest really emphasized this fact that you can't really change the past, and by extension, you cannot change fate. A prophecy is the history of the future in the same way that history is the fate of the past.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
When witnessing the phantoms near the spaceship, Varka says, "It's almost like we're in some kind of interactive stage play. We can talk to the actors, but the plot is fixed and we can't influence it." Hey, do you guys remember that other interactive stage play we witnessed and participated in that was just actually a huge allegory about plays, scripts, and fate? It's William Kaeya Shakespeare time! All the world's a stage, and all its people merely players. Now, Kaeya does a mysterious monologue about how we're all both actors and audience, and how we don't have to follow the script. But the key part of the play is that Kaeya improvised his role. He didn't follow the script. And here's the thing. He didn't change the major plot points, and the ending was still the same. However, the improvisation made the meaning of the ending very different. And on top of that, he engaged with the audience in a truly interactive way. He threw his intaglio to Traveler. And now it's in our inventory, and it shouldn't be there technically according to the script. And now it's just a little trinket that reminds us of our fun and intimate and romantic and maybe even sensual hangout with Kaeya. But what if this item were a bit more consequential? You know, like a small variable that could stack with other variables that could amount to something big. Do you see where I'm going with this? At the end of the quest, when talking about Dottore stacking variables to create his scheme, Varka suggests they try to stack their own variables. These variables are small, slight, minor, but potentially consequential changes to how the story is supposed to go. So, first, I think Columbina's time shenanigans will be a huge part of that. But that's exactly what Kaeya tried to demonstrate with his own audience interaction. Didn't change the plot, but did something that could ripple into something profound. Yeah, so that's all I have for this video right now. And yes, I have done Fischl's Witches Hangout thing. Patience, my liege. I'm gonna be brief with this outro though, because I'm running late to poker night. Although I know a lot of you will probably comment saying that this was a flush. Ha! That was a poop joke, by the way. A pooker joke, even. I need to contain my silliness. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And share this video with your friends, your grandma, your dog, your neighbor, your probation officer, or even just run up to a stranger in the street, phone in hand, and jump scare them with my voice. Your probation officer might not like that, but that's why you show it to them first, and hopefully they like it. Anyway, that's all I have. Okay, bye. Oh, wait. Did you check your smoke detectors? Okay, bye for real.